The crushing weight of the Mariana Trench was a familiar embrace to Elias Thorne. He loved it here, in the inky blackness where sunlight surrendered. The ocean's deepest, darkest corner held a siren's call for him, a siren that whispered secrets only he seemed to understand. He called his submersible Kraken's kiss. It was a sardonic joke, born from years of facing down the leviathans that inhabited these crushing depths. Elias, with his salt-streaked hair and eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea, had earned himself a less affectionate moniker in the scientific community. The Sea Madman. Some said he was reckless, obsessed. They couldn't grasp his profound respect for the ocean's apex predators, mistaking it for a death wish. 15 years. For 15 years, Elias had plumbed the depths, studying the Kraken and its cousins. He knew the hunting patterns of great whites off Guadalupe Island better than his own heartbeat. He could anticipate the electric grace of a giant squid in the Humboldt Current, its massive eyes scanning the abyss. He had even stared down a pod of orcas in the Antarctic, feeling the icy pulse of their sonar wash over his submersible as they debated his worth as prey. Today, Elias was cataloging bioluminescent organisms in the Sirena Deep, a small depression within the Challenger Deep, the deepest known point in Earth's oceans. The Kraken's kiss, a titanium sphere bristling with sensors and equipped with advanced sonar, navigated the treacherous terrain with practiced ease. Elias, the energy spike is off the charts. Are you seeing this? The voice of Dr. Anya Sharma, his lead engineer, crackled through his headset. Her tone, usually measured and calm, had an edge of concern. Affirmative, Anya. Readings are spiking all over. I'm trying to isolate the source. Elias adjusted the sensors, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The bioluminescent display shimmered, painting the cramped interior of the submersible in shifting hues of emerald and sapphire. It's fluctuating wildly. Almost like a pulse? Anya's voice was laced with incredulity. Elias, you need to be careful. This is unlike anything we've ever encountered. Understood, Anya. But you know I can't resist a good mystery. Elias grinned, a habit that always sent shivers down Anya's spine, even across thousands of miles. He nudged the Kraken's kiss forward, drawn towards the source of the anomaly. The pressure was immense, the crushing force of tons of water pressing against the submersible. The bioluminescence grew stronger, revealing bizarre, alien life forms that even Elias, with his decades of experience, had never witnessed. Then it happened. A blinding flash of white light engulfed the Kraken's kiss. The sensors screamed, throwing error messages in a cascade of red. The interior of the submersible was thrown into violent chaos. Elias! Elias, report! What's happening? Anya's voice was a frantic scream, but Elias couldn't respond. He gripped the controls, fighting to maintain stability, as the submersible bucked and shuddered. The light intensified, burning through his eyelids even when he slammed them shut. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. Silence descended, a deafening, unnatural silence that was even more unsettling than the chaos that had preceded it. Elias blinked, his vision swimming. The bioluminescent display had gone haywire, showing nothing but static. The submersible, however, was miraculously intact. Anya? Anya, can you hear me? He spoke into the comms, his voice strained. A faint, static-laced response came back. Elias, report status. I'm here, Anya. I'm disoriented. But the Kraken's kiss is still functioning. What was that? Anya's reply was fragmented, barely audible through the interference. Unknown, energy surge. EMP, telemetry, lost, you're off-grid. Elias cursed. Great. Just great. Being cut off from the surface in the deepest part of the ocean was not a scenario he relished. As he grappled with the situation, he saw them. 3 figures, impossibly tall and slender, stood on the seabed directly in front of the Kraken's kiss. They shimmered in the faint bioluminescence, their forms almost indistinct at first. As Elias focused, he realized they weren't creatures of Earth. They were Valdarians. Their skin had a deep blue hue that refracted and shimmered underwater. Their limbs were long and graceful, and they wore suits of silvery material that seemed to flow and ripple with their movements. Their eyes were large, black, and entirely without pupils, giving them an alien, unnerving gaze. "This is impossible," Elias breathed, his heart hammering in his chest. He knew the historical records. Sightings of UAPs by ancient mariners. The few, heavily redacted reports from military encounters. But never had there been credible, documented contact. Until now. The figures approached, moving with an ethereal grace that defied the crushing pressure. One of them raised a hand, a long, slender hand with webbed fingers. Elias instinctively braced himself for, what? An attack? An abduction? He wasn't sure what to expect from beings beyond human comprehension. Instead, one of the Valdarians spoke, the voice clear and resonant despite the vast ocean separating them. "Dr. Elias Thorne," it said, the voice a perfect, synthesized baritone. "We have been observing your work. We require your expertise." Elias stared, speechless. His mind, usually a whirlwind of scientific curiosity, ground to a halt. He could think of nothing to say, no scientific observation to make, no witty retort. "We are representatives of the Stellar Alliance," the Valdarian continued. "We maintain a research station in these waters. We believe you possess the knowledge we seek." "Research station? Here?" Elias finally managed to stammer out. "What kind of research?" "The study of apex predators," the Valdarian replied. "We have observed your unconventional methods, your apparent lack of fear, your understanding." "Understanding?" Elias repeated, intrigued. "Of what?" "Of the balance. Of the power. Of the respect that must be given to those who hold dominion over their domain." The Valdarian gestured towards the abyssal plains stretching out behind them. "We wish to learn from your earthly perspective." The door to the Kraken's kiss hissed open, and a beam of shimmering light spilled into the darkness. 3 more Valdarians stood at the entrance, gesturing for Elias to follow. "Come, Dr. Thorne," the first Valdarian said. "There is much to discuss. And much to learn." Elias took a deep breath, the recycled air in the submersible suddenly feeling stale and thin. The choice before him was insane, a plunge into the unknown that could very well mean his doom. But the lure of the abyss, and the siren call of the unexplored, were too strong to resist. "Lead the way," he said, a thrill of exhilaration coursing through him despite the palpable danger. The Sea Madman was about to venture into waters far deeper and stranger than anything he had ever imagined. The descent to the Valdarian research station felt like a dream. Elias, still reeling from the encounter on the seabed, sat in a sleek, teardrop-shaped pod, its hull constructed from a material that seemed to bend and warp the light around it. The 3 Valdarians from his submersible accompanied him, their blue skin glowing softly in the ethereal light of the pod's interior. As they plunged deeper into the Mariana Trench, the pressure steadily increased. Elias could feel it pressing against him, a constant, heavy reminder of the alien world he was entering. "The pods are pressurized to alleviate discomfort, Dr. Thorne," one of the Valdarians stated, a being Elias now knew as Zinther, the leader of the delegation. "You can expect no ill effects." Elias nodded, trying to appear unfazed by the alien technology. He was used to dealing with pressure, both physical and metaphorical, but this was on an entirely different scale. "How far down are we going?" Elias asked, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Beyond the abyssal plain," Zinther replied, his dark eyes unwavering. "To the Hadal Zone. The realm of perpetual darkness." The Hadal Zone. Even Elias, with his intimate knowledge of the ocean, felt a prickle of unease. It was a region so deep, so unexplored, that it was practically a different world. It was said that the creatures there had evolved in such extreme isolation that they bore little resemblance to life on the upper levels of the sea. As if to punctuate his thoughts, a strange, pulsating glow appeared in the distance. It grew brighter as they approached, resolving into a vast, sprawling structure unlike anything Elias had ever seen. "Welcome to Station Deep Echo," Zinther announced, a hint of pride in his voice. The station was massive, dwarfing even the largest submersibles Elias had encountered in his career. Domes and towers, constructed from a material that resembled shimmering, living coral, stretched out across the ocean floor. Long, luminescent tubes connected the different sections, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. "It's incredible," Elias said, struggling to find the words to describe the sheer scale and alien beauty of the station. "It is the culmination of centuries of research," Zinta replied. "A sanctuary for knowledge, a fortress of understanding." As they approached a massive docking bay, Elias saw movement within the station. Figures of all shapes and sizes, clad in strange, shimmering garments, glided through the corridors. It was a melting pot of alien life, a testament to the reach and influence of the Stellar Alliance. The pod docked with a gentle hum, and the outer hatch opened, revealing a brightly lit chamber filled with an array of unfamiliar instruments and monitors. Two Valdarians, clad in what appeared to be scientific garb, stood waiting to greet them. "Dr. Thorne, welcome to Abisha," one of them said, extending a webbed hand in greeting. "I am Morel, the station's director." Morel was shorter than Zinther, with lighter blue skin and a more approachable demeanor. "Welcome," said the other researcher. His name was Dorv, and he was a rather squat and purple, with mandibles clicking. "Thank you," Elias replied, accepting the gesture. "It's an honor to be here. We have much to show you," Morel said. "But first, you must be made aware of the dangers." Morel led Elias through a series of sterile corridors, each filled with strange and fascinating sights. He saw creatures suspended in glowing tanks, their forms so alien that they defied description. He saw Valdarian scientists hunched over consoles, analyzing data that was incomprehensible to him. He felt like a child in a cosmic museum, overwhelmed by the sheer diversity and strangeness of it all. Finally, they arrived at a large observation deck overlooking an enormous cylindrical tank. "This," Morel said, his voice taking on a somber tone, "is where you will be working." Elias approached the railing, his breath catching in his throat. The tank was filled with swirling, inky black water, barely illuminated by a few faint lights at the bottom. Whatever was in there was massive. "What is it?" Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This, Dr. Thorne, is an Exorian Death Stalker," Morel replied. "We call him Kaithar." Elias peered into the darkness, his eyes straining to make out the details. Then, a shape emerged from the shadows. A shape that filled him with a primal, instinctive dread. The Death Stalker. Its form was vaguely serpentine, its body sleek and powerful, propelled by rows of bioluminescent fins. Its head was flat and elongated, dominated by two massive, crimson eyes that seemed to pierce through the water and into his very soul. Its mouth was a horrifying array of razor-sharp teeth arranged in four rotating jaws, a living buzzsaw designed for utter annihilation. "Only 4 of these are known to be contained," said Morel. "It is the apex predator of Nexus V," Morel continued. "Its hunting prowess is legendary. Its aggression, unparalleled." "Aggression?" Elias asked, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "We have lost 3 researchers attempting to study Kaithar," Morel replied grimly. "Their methods lacked your unique understanding." "And you want me to, what?" Elias asked, his voice barely audible. "Swim with that thing. We believe you are uniquely qualified to make contact, Dr. Thorne," Morel said. "To understand it. To learn from it. But be warned," he added, his voice hardening. "Kaithar is not to be underestimated. One mistake, one sign of weakness, and it will tear you apart." Elias stared into the black depths of the tank, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that this was madness. He knew that he was risking his life for a project that was, at best, improbable. But the Sea Madman couldn't resist the challenge. "Very well," Elias said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Let's meet the Death Stalker." Elias stared at the interior of the special chamber that was constructed to serve as an entryway into the Death Stalker's den. All that separated Elias from Kaithar were the specialized systems that Morrel and their construction teams had created. Elias couldn't help but feel nervous at the prospect that the only thing that was going to keep him alive was a thin door to a chamber filled with instruments that he only had a vague understanding of. "Are you sure about this, Dr. Thorne?" said Morrel over his comm. "There may still be time to back out. We've seen people do it here." "This too? That's not really reassuring," replied Elias. After taking a moment to prepare himself mentally, Elias stepped into the room that would eventually be filled with the seawater of Kythar's prison. As the door shut behind him, Elias activated the flooding procedure and awaited his fate. The tank, after a couple of minutes of pumping, was finally filled and another door on the other side slid open, leaving Elias face to face with Kythar. The two stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Kythar's eyes, glowing red, scanned him from head to toe. Elias could only hope that the information that had been painstakingly fed to them about the Deathstalker was actually the truth. Any false information could result in his brutal demise. With that thought in mind, Elias began one of his routine calming gestures, slowly moving his hand with its palm open. "Okay, Kythar, I'm not going to threaten you," said Elias through the speakers in his mask. "I'm just here to learn more about you." The beast did not react. Elias decided to continue with his routine, figuring that the silence meant there would be no impending attack. He continued to extend his hand, before Kythar finally responded by extending a tentacle-like appendage to him. Elias' heart stopped, but he managed to keep his composure as the appendage went closer and closer. Finally, it reached him. The Deathstalker reached out, and with the end of its tentacle stroked the palm of Elias' hand. That's when everything went wrong. As quickly as Elias had gotten there, the room began to violently shake. Explosions rang out all around the tank. The power to the lights were out, the room was a mess. He felt a strong vibration in his bones as pieces of Kythar's prison shook apart and fell. Elias struggled to get his footing, and activated the emergency comms. "Morrel! What's going on out there? What in the galaxies is happening?" shouted Elias. "Elias! Listen, we can't get out of here! Some kind of crazy sabotage. All the emergency controls are locked, and it sounds like the station is breaking apart," said Morrel through the comms. "Whatever you do, don't panic. Just find an escape route, okay?" And just like that, the communication ended. Elias was alone, without anyone to contact. The only thing that remained was him, and the apex predator that he was trapped in. He knew one thing: if he were to survive, the first thing he had to do was to calm Kythar. Elias wasn't sure how he managed to find Kythar in the dark, but Elias was able to make out the faint red glow that served as Kythar's eyes in the inky blackness. "Hey there, big guy," Elias stated, with a shaky voice that he hoped didn't indicate any fear to the beast. "Looks like we are in a bit of a pickle right now." Kythar did not respond, but its eyes pulsed faster, seeming to indicate a feeling of discomfort and unease. Good enough for him, Elias thought, before activating the comm to send an audio message to the world. "To whomever is reading this, I am Dr. Elias Thorne, aboard the research vessel, Kraken's Kiss, and am currently stuck on the alien research station Deep Echo. At 10 o'clock our station time, the facility was hit by a series of explosions which lead to structural failure and imminent destruction of the facility. Due to what I believe is a sabotage, I am unable to reach anyone from the crew. If any search and rescue teams are out there, I am currently stuck in the Leviathan chamber. Be advised, a Deathstalker, known as Kythar, is with me. Proceed with caution." Even though nobody would probably ever hear the transmission, it gave him a sense of closure. As if he had managed to make a permanent mark of his existence in the vast universe. But for now, Elias knew he had to keep his head in the game. He was stuck in this submerged tomb with what the universe had determined to be the deadliest killing machine it had ever seen. The best thing that he could do for now, Elias figured, was to figure out what was so important to the apex predator. "Look, Kythar, I know this might be a little bit difficult to understand at the moment," Elias continued to speak. "But maybe we can work together, and maybe we can escape. What do you say?" The crimson eyes of Kythar glowed brighter, and Elias immediately felt a connection to the animal. It was telling him what it desired. He needed to leave. "All right, buddy, that's what I intend on doing," Elias responded. "Now which way do we go?" With that, the beast started forward, with Elias hesitantly following behind. Despite the sheer size of the alien beast, Elias found himself being aided by Kydar as they navigated through the ruined facility. Debris was being moved and areas were being scanned. Elias could only imagine the power that was required to communicate to him all of this information. It didn't seem like Kydar was actively speaking to him, but was somehow delivering signals. Perhaps a sixth sense? Elias mused that more research would have to be done on the concept if they were to survive this mess. After what felt like an eternity, Kydar led Elias into a section that was only knee-deep in water, giving the much-needed relief that the sub-zero waters couldn't offer. The corridor opened to a large room, filled with technology that was completely beyond any of Elias's understanding. "So, now what?" Elias asked. Kydar then responded by moving towards what seemed to be a broken telecommunications array and started tugging away at a few loose cables. The cables were, for a lack of a better word, plugged directly into its body. A scary concept that Elias pushed to the back of his head, to focus on what to do next. "Are you sure about this?" Elias asked. "That looks really dang. What are you doing with your hands?" Elias looked down to his hands, and almost had a heart attack. Despite the water and ruined room, his hands had started manipulating the strange technology. It was almost as if someone were manually moving his hands to the correct locations. Kydar then once again sent thoughts to him, the thoughts of something it had learned, as well as what it wanted Elias to do. "Well, I'll be," Elias said. "All right, big guy, here we go. Connecting now." A surge of power then coursed through the system as Elias's hands had connected enough pieces of the ruined telecommunications array. For a brief moment, the monitors around him flickered before one started to glow, displaying alien glyphs and charts that nobody could possibly understand. Regardless of understanding it, Elias could only hope that somewhere, someone would be able to receive the message. After what felt like forever, Elias began to notice that the tremors in the room began to subside. Kydar still moved around frantically, as if telling Elias to leave. With the limited experience that Elias had with the creature, he could only hope that he could actually convey the message that he was trying to send. "I am heading out now. Is there anything else you have to take care of? I can't keep it up for much longer," shouted Elias. There was a short pause before Kydar responded. It conveyed a feeling that Elias could only equate to the alien's version of goodbye. "I'll take that as a no," said Elias, before disconnecting from Kydar and immediately making his way back to the transport pod. It was difficult, but with all of the training and experience he had, Elias was able to survive just fine. Now came the problem of actually leaving the area. "All right, team, now can you hear me?" asked Elias in the comms. "Yes, I hear," replied a woman through his speaker. "Dr. Th. E.Y.S. go on." "Hey, Anya! You hear me all right?" asked Elias in response. "Loud and clear." "Elias, what happened back there?" asked Anya. "Tell you what happened once I get to you guys, all right?" responded Elias. "The flooding did short a couple of things, so I am going to have to manually activate the transport system. Stand by and good luck, because I don't think the facility's going to hold for much longer." Elias out. It took everything Elias had to manually activate the pod, but the rewards would be immediate. Elias felt a G-force-like sensation that nearly had him blacking out, but he managed to pull through as the pod detached from the station and blasted upwards. As he shot to the surface, Elias could only watch as he left Kydar behind. Not just Kydar but the whole station as well. Everything that the Stellar Alliance had worked to achieve was going to be buried. Yet something had to have been achieved, right? The aliens had sought to understand and contain the apex predator, yet it had to fall to a human to create a meaningful bond between the two. Elias could only hope that the transmission had gone through, as the pod had finally burst through the surface of the ocean. Bright rays of sun filled the pod, illuminating the area like a warm blanket of relief. What greeted him once the hatch opened was not rescue team, however, but the guns of more Valdarians. "Step out of the vehicle, Doctor!" shouted one of the officers. "Do it now!" "What in the universe is going on?" responded Elias. "We'll explain everything, now drop your equipment and move," the officer stated as they began advancing. After a couple hours of debriefing, it was finally explained to Elias of what had occurred. Cynthia was of the belief that the apex creatures should be weapons, and was willing to do anything to achieve his goals. By sabotaging the reactor, he had intended for all to die to prove his point. What he didn't expect was the alliance of predator and prey, and just barely escaping from the facility alive. The act had resulted in Cynthia being arrested, as well as the Stellar Alliance reviewing his role as a predator communicator. "While this is all good and well," said Elias, "what does this mean for me?" It turns out that Elias had made a connection with the higher-ups in the Star Alliance with his report on how the mission had gone. It was because of this that instead of his previous role, Elias was instead assigned to a different part of the galaxy where even stranger beasts roamed. The thought filled Elias with anticipation. He could only imagine all that was out there waiting to be discovered, waiting to be befriended. "All right, guess I'm going to have to pack up," replied Elias. "I can never stay in one place for too long, the sea madness always calls." The sonar pinged uselessly against the abyssal plains, returning nothing but static and the echo of Elias's own ragged breathing. The energy surge that had ripped through the Sirena Deep hadn't just knocked out the Kraken's Kiss's comms, it had fried the navigation systems, leaving him adrift in the crushing darkness. "Just like old times," Elias muttered, forcing a sardonic grin. He'd faced worse technical failures and far more precarious situations. Years of solo expeditions had honed his resourcefulness, turning him into a one-man repair crew. He activated the emergency floodlights, bathing the interior of the submersible in a harsh, utilitarian glow. He began methodically troubleshooting, tracing cables and checking circuits, his movements economical and precise. Anya's words echoed in his ears, "You need to be careful." He dismissed them as best he could. After so many years he knows what he is doing. The Kraken's Kiss sputtered and groaned as Elias rerouted power, bypassing damaged components. Hours crawled by. The chill of the abyss seeped into the submersible's hull, pressing against him like an invisible hand. His oxygen levels were dropping, but he couldn't afford to conserve it. He needed to get the comms back online, to let someone know he was still alive. Suddenly, a flicker on the main screen. A faint, fragmented image shimmered into existence, then stabilized. It was a visual feed from one of the exterior cameras. "Anya?" Elias said into his comms. It was silent. All he could see with his own eyes was a large vessel and those large glowing humanoid figures. "Anya, what's going on?" What the video showed on the screen was not what he expected. The black surface of the water was instead light blue, almost as if the ocean had turned into a sky, the stars twinkling as water flooded the camera. Then nothing. As Elias turned the camera over, a different screen suddenly came up. It wasn't the exterior camera like the first one. This one was inside a large ship, full of various aliens staring into him. "Well, I'll be," said Elias in a nervous tone. He couldn't possibly turn down what they were about to tell him. Elias activated the engine as they approached him. The beam of light had already started as they slowly approached the vessel that he knew to be the Valdarians. What kind of world was he heading into to know about aliens more than what he had already read about? They have all been described in the history books that humans have only come to recognize as mythology, or just straight-up hoaxes. But Elias Thorne knew those stories had truth to them. He always knew it. He just didn't want to have to see it in his own lifetime. Elias looked to the sea, knowing it may be the last time he'd see his home for a long time. "Goodbye for now, my love," he muttered to the sea. Elias Thorne, a man who loved the ocean, was ready to embrace the stars. He floated for a couple of minutes before he started to be pulled into the vessel. "Well, this is gonna be interesting," Elias thought before he blacked out. It was just after a couple of minutes but Elias woke up in an area that was much more luxurious than the submarine he'd built from scratch. Large beds, soft lighting. These things had no effect, however, as Elias noticed how wet everything still was. "How much time did I spend out there?" he said in a daze. "Do not fret, human, there are many things we have to discuss." The voice came in a melodious harmony, an angel for his ears. "But do not worry. We have you covered in every possible way we could." As if on command, various robotic arms extended to Elias, giving the necessary items for his cleansing. These people seemed to already know what they wanted him to do. And despite the fact that Elias should be fearful about what would come next, he instead felt a sense of acceptance. After cleansing himself as best he could, Elias exited the chamber. What came out was something that he did not expect. It was more aliens. The corridors were filled to the brim with more species than Elias had ever thought possible. Some tall, some small. Some reptilian, some mammalian. Even some insects were included as well. The sheer diversity had taken his breath away. It would take him a couple lifetimes just to study everything that was going on in this ship. As Elias walked across the corridor, it was as if he were a celebrity, with many people making way and whispering about who he was. "Dr. Thorne, please allow me to guide you to where our discussion will occur," said one of the Valdarian aliens that were there to greet Elias. As they were walking, Elias's curiosity got the better of him. "How long have you guys been here?" Elias asked the Valdarian. "It has been so long that you, with your short lifespan, would not understand. To make you comfortable, however, allow me to say that we have resided here for over 57 years of your time," responded the Valdarian. "And you never considered showing yourself to the rest of the world?" asked Elias. "We did not have the need. We were happy to leave you be, but the Leviathan project had made it necessary. You had managed to communicate with apex predators, with your unique ability to not generate malice. Such an attribute has made us believe that you would have a place among us, the Stellar Alliance," responded the Valdarian. "Apex predator that could help its team members?" Elias thought to himself, what in the world was about to happen? Finally, Elias had been brought to the center of the establishment, a large room with views of the ocean everywhere. The walls were lined with strange glyphs, alien texts that humans wouldn't even begin to comprehend. What the screens were showing were beyond even Elias.